When I was 14, one of the craziest things I've ever experienced happened to me. It was so crazy that now that I think of it, I wonder how I was able to go through that period without losing my mind. Like all things like this all started when I moved to a new house. To be honest, the house was a downgrade from the one we used to live in, but it was in a far more expensive neighborhood, so it cost more. I had to share a room with my brother, which, if I'm being honest, was far from the greatest thing in the world. Point is, my life generally received a downgrade that summer. I changed schools, and I had to lose most of the things I had in my former room. It was just, generally speaking, a bad experience for me. However, I never knew that it was going to get worse. No, it was really, really going to get worse. It all started about a month after we moved. Summer was over, and a new school year was just beginning. Although I didn't love my new school, I didn't hate it either. It was just an average school with average people with average everything. One evening when I came home from school, I saw a boy who was about my age. He was standing at the front of my house. He had regular clothes on, but he had no shoes. Aside from his lack of shoes, everything about him seemed pretty normal as normal can be. I knew my brother didn't hang out with younger kids, so he couldn't possibly be his friend. I also knew that my elder sister didn't hang out with younger kids too, so he couldn't possibly be her friend. That left only one reasonable option. The boy was here for me. But that would be strange because I'd never seen him. I walked up to him and tried to make conversation. The moment I said a word, he started crying. He bawled his eyes out, and I couldn't get him to calm down till my mom returned from work. And even then, he wouldn't stop crying. After a while, my mom was able to calm him down. She took him in and gave him some hot chocolate. It was pretty late, but she was still able to call Child Protective Services. They told her that someone would come right over in the morning and that we should hold on to the kid for now. Before long, my mom had bullied me into giving up my bed for him. Apparently, I was to sleep next to my brother on his very slim bed. However, since it would only be for one night, I wasn't too bothered. Interestingly, the boy quieted down when he was shown where he would sleep. In fact, he even managed to eat some food. Despite this, he never said a word. I don't even remember him making a sound. When my mom asked if he would like to change from his clothes and have a bath, he started bawling once more, so she took that as a vehement no. Night came soon enough, and I went to bed early. The day hadn't been a great one, and I just couldn't wait to get it over with. In the middle of the night, I woke up with my brother's screams in my ears. I rolled off the bed and scrambled to find my glasses. As I was looking for them, I felt shards of glass on the floor. I used my hands to feel the floor, and I discovered that someone had either smashed my glasses or it had fallen off and broken. And since my floor was soft and covered with a rug, it was unlikely that it had gotten smashed by falling off my desk. As I was still thinking of the tragedy of my glasses, I felt a huge shove at the back of my head. It seemed someone was trying to push me to the ground and strangle me. My first thought was that it was a burglar. But why would a burglar want to strangle me? I'm generally a decent person. But that's when I noticed, even though my eyesight was bad, that my bed was empty. Where was the boy? Immediately after this, my brother's screams began to register. He seemed to be shouting, "Freak! Freak! Who are you? Get off him! Why are you doing this?" Before long, my dad entered our room, but surprisingly, between my brother shouting and me looking for my glasses, the boy had disappeared. We searched throughout the house, but we couldn't find him. The next morning, we received a social services woman who told us a story that left us all at the edge of our seats. Apparently, this wasn't the first time a family living in that house would be calling about a boy with no shoes. In fact, this experience was one of the reasons the previous owners of our house sold it. Although the social services woman tried her best to assure us that we weren't victims of a crying ghost, it was impossible to convince us. We moved away the next year. Teachers are great, right? That's what I used to think too. This is a story I've never told anyone because of how crazy it sounds, and because it involves a teacher I once deeply liked. However, it's been 2 years now, and I think I can finally share this tale of fear, sorcery, and ghosts. It was my senior year in high school, and our class decided to go camping. It was going to be a one-night thing. We'd go, won't tell anyone, and the entire thing would be over with. We all wanted to make a memory that we would all leave high school with. Unfortunately, one of the coolest teachers in the school heard about our plans. Let's call this man Mr. X. Mr. X was a pretty cool guy. He was cool with almost everyone and was generally a nice guy. So when he heard, we mostly didn't get mad. I mean, we were annoyed for sure, but we knew that he wouldn't tell on us, so everything was good. I was part of the organizers of the campout, so I reached out to Mr. X and told him that I knew that he knew of our plan. I told him that class would really appreciate it if he kept the information to himself. He thought about it for a while and decided that he would, but on one condition. He had to follow us. It seemed like an odd request, but since he was a really chill guy, I said okay. If the school eventually found out, it would be great to say we had a chaperone. The day eventually came and everyone arrived in different cars. However, by 8, we were already complete. We were only about 40, so it wasn't a crowd. We had fun dancing and setting up camp, and soon we started telling scary stories. The bonfire was bright, and it was all very exciting. Some of the stories were scary, while some were not, but around 2 a.m., everyone went to sleep. But I was still awake. For some reason, I couldn't sleep. While I sat on a tree stump in a dark corner, I saw Mr. X stand up and leave his tent. We had a separate one for him. He went directly into the bushes. I sort of wanted to follow him, but I didn't. We didn't have a mobile toilet, so I thought he was going to urinate or something. About a minute later, I started hearing slow chants from where Mr. X had gone. I picked up my torchlight and decided to go check it out. I had no weapons, so I picked up a stick that looked like it would be able to break a few bones. I started inching towards the part of the bush Mr. X had entered, and I noticed that I was hearing more than one voice. In fact, it seemed like there was a whole choir in there. I entered the bush and shone my torchlight at where I believed the sound was coming from. And that was when I saw the most shocking thing I've ever seen. Mr. X was in a clearing, lying naked in the middle of a crudely drawn star, and had about 3 other people chanting around him. Immediately they saw me. The 4 of them ran away, I ran away too, and I went to call my friends. When we returned to the spot, we saw nothing. No footprints, no star, nothing. In fact, my friends began to think I was crazy, but when they couldn't find Mr. X in his tent, my story began to make more sense than they wished to admit. In the morning, we decided to tell the others that Mr. X had returned to school because of some work. It was by far the best explanation, as we couldn't find his car either. When we returned to school the next Monday, the principal told us that Mr. X had moved away suddenly and would no longer be teaching at our school. A few months later, while researching for a term paper, I found a curious story that closely resembled my story with Mr. X. Apparently, a teacher in a town near mine had been caught carrying out rituals in 1967. He escaped from jail mysteriously and was never found. I got curious and started looking for other stories like that. I found another one that happened in 1975 in a nearby town too. And lastly, I found a picture of the 1967 teacher. It was in black and white, but there was no doubt it was Mr. X. This is a story I don't like telling. Why? Because it's true. I wouldn't want to expose myself and the other people involved in this story, so I'll give only monikers, and I will narrate it to the best of my ability in the third person. Even though I'm narrating it in the third person, you must know that I'm an integral part of this story. Everything I'm saying was experienced firsthand. That is, I was there, I saw it, and I felt it. On August of a certain year, a certain woman named Karen Banks died. Her death was pretty normal. She'd been sick for a while, and she was pretty old. She had 4 daughters and 2 boys, and they were all really well off. Karen Banks didn't leave a lot of money for her children, but they were well off, so it didn't really matter. And that's where everything normal about this story ends. First off, Karen Banks was buried on the day she died. Doctors proclaimed that they'd rarely seen a burial that was as rushed. In fact, the only time they saw same-day burials is when Muslims die. However, since Karen Banks was Catholic, there was absolutely no reason to bury her on the same day she died. The next day, a small church service was held in her honor. It was a rushed event too, and had only a few of her friends and family around. The second day after her death, all of Karen's children died. One was found dead in her room with a suicide note. Another was crushed by a driver who was drinking and driving. One died from a heroin overdose. One got shot in the head during a botched robbery. One was in a ghastly car accident, and the last was found in ashes when his house mysteriously burnt down. And so it was that Karen Banks had no surviving children. Of course, the death of the children of Karen Banks was strange enough, but no one thought it was scary. The 6 children died in different parts of the country, and they all seemed like pretty accidental deaths, but the deaths were not done. Karen Banks had 3 husbands, and 3 of them were alive. Before the death of Karen, she'd been on good terms with all 3 of them, so they'd attended her funeral too. The week after the death of Karen Banks, her ex-husband started dropping dead too. One developed a sudden case of cancer and died the next day in one of the most baffling deaths ever. Another had a cardiac arrest, and the third had a printer dropped on his head from the topmost floor of his building. And still, Karen Banks wasn't done. One by one, everyone that was at the church service after her death started to drop dead. Some of her friends that had attended the funeral started seeing the pattern of death and knew they had to do something fast or else they may die too. 2 of them went to see a soothsayer who told them that Karen Banks' spirit was going about killing people. Why, they asked, why? The soothsayer said no reason, really. She was just really into the killing. The 2 friends asked if Karen would kill them as well. The soothsayer said that it was a distinct possibility. Was there a way that this could be avoided, asked the 2 friends. Yes, the soothsayer replied. They would have to find where Karen was buried and place a white gem on her bones. That way her spirit would be bound to her body. It was a grave undertaking and none of her friends felt they could do it. However, when Karen's niece drowned the next day, they returned to the soothsayer and took the gem. And thus started a journey of fear, ghosts, and gems. The 2 friends were able to dig up a casket of Karen Banks after hours of toiling with a single shovel. They opened the casket. They were shocked to see nothing. There was no body in it. In the casket was a note. "Hitherto shalt thou come, and no further," said the note. And on their way home from the graveyard, the 2 friends were killed by a drunk driver.